A city is an organic living thing, and it is composed of people, and that's what makes it alive. Without people, a city is just an empty shell of glass and steel and brick and concrete. It's people who animate a city and who give it life. And we know this because when we go to the cities that we love to spend time in, no matter where they are, they may even be our own city, they're full of people. People on the street, people walking through the sidewalks, people walking across the street. They're going to shop, they're going to work, they're going to school. They're tourists who are kind of looking around wondering where they are, right? But there are people everywhere. And we love to be in these places because we see ourselves all around us. We see other people like ourselves who are having a good time, who are enjoying themselves. And the spaces that they're populating and the reasons that we like to be there are made for us. You know, we see that they're person scale. We see that there are signs that are at eye level. We see that there are a lot of things to do along a whole corridor. So it's full of activity and it's full of variety and it's full of life. And so we like to go to these places at any time of day because we feel safe, because we feel that at any time of day we'll be able to find something to do. If we end up at one of these places, coming out of, say, we go somewhere for theater, we go somewhere for a special destination or for a shop, that if we come out at night, we'll still feel safe. We won't feel that we've suddenly entered into a territory that is foreign and dangerous and doesn't feel comfortable for us to be in. So it's important for these spaces in our cities to have life at all times of day. In the morning, in the afternoon, in the evening. So whenever you're on these streets, you feel comfortable. You feel like you're a part of something. A healthy city is like a river. It's in constant motion. And rivers are natural gathering places for us. If they're in cities, this is in the city of Reno where I live, because there's always something new to see, and there's always some kind of movement, and there's always some kind of activity. We all know we've experienced a time when we might be in a city, and we walk a block, we take a turn, and suddenly things don't feel comfortable. It may be that there are vacant storefronts, it may be that there are actually vacant lots and vacant spaces, and what getting in these places tells us is that this isn't a desirable place to be. It's not physically appealing, and there aren't reasons to be here. And if we didn't plan to actually end up in an area like this, we might reach this space, and it can happen in the space of a city block, and turn around and walk another direction. If we need to be in this space, we might try to get through it as quickly as we possibly can to get somewhere else where we feel more comfortable. And so we all have spaces like these throughout our cities. And when you are walking in these spaces, sometimes you feel conspicuous. You may feel like everybody is looking at you because there aren't a lot of other people around. You know, I lead walking tours sometimes of the city where I live as a historian, and I can feel this happening. You know, I can feel when things kind of take a shift. And we're in an area that's very comfortable around the river or around the civic center or around a lot of shops and restaurants. And then suddenly we feel very conspicuous and like people are kind of looking at us. And sometimes people who weren't on the tour to begin with start to join the tour, and you have other people kind of following along, right? And so we know when these spaces are not working well. You know, we know when they're not really functioning correctly, and so we can identify these things intuitively. You know, we know when we look at a space that this is not a desirable area, right? This is not a place that people are investing their time and their money, and they're really not wanting to spend time here. So we can identify these things, I think, and we're kind of aware of them, but I want to kind of give some tools to try to look at what these spaces are doing and how they're doing it so we can try to learn how to make them better spaces. You know, when we run across a space like this is a space that tells us you, the walker, are not the priority here. You know, this is what I kind of call the trifecta. We have a parking garage and a monorail and a skywalk. And all of this is meant to transport people somewhere except the sidewalks, you know. So you're not going to get vibrant city life in a sidewalk in this area because it's not orchestrated that way. That's not who it's for. And when we think about what makes places desirable places to be and to spend time and make them appealing, a word that often comes to mind is walkability. Walkability is kind of a funny word because it literally means you're able to walk somewhere. And walkability is a big buzzword today, really, among architects and urban planners and people who work in the built environment to try to make the spaces that we live in and work in and play in more appealing. But it's not just about being able to physically walk in a space, because if we can literally walk somewhere and navigate through it, that would make it walkable, right? But this is about making these places more appealing, and making them more desirable, and making them places that people want to spend time and invest in, and play and work and live. And so it's also very important to note that walkability isn't about distance. We'll actually, under certain circumstances, be willing to walk for hours, in a place, if it has certain characteristics, and that can be true on a city street, but we can also learn a lot from the shopping mall. The shopping mall, which ironically kind of took a lot of traffic away from streets in the first place, but bear with me. So shopping malls do a lot to try to make the spaces more appealing to people. They're all about pedestrians. So how do they do this? Well, of course, they take away cars, and that's one step, okay? But they do a lot of other things, too. They have a lot of variety. They're well lit. They're comfortable. They have a lot going on all the time, and visually, there's a great deal going on. Every shop in a mall has a big window. You can see inside. You can see what's happening there. You can see what's happening in the next space next to it. And these things are pedestrian scale. There are signs, there's activities, sometimes there's music, right? They can be climate controlled. And so malls can really tell us what you can do to try to keep someone in a place for a long time, because someone will spend hours and hours at a mall when they're not really willing to park in a parking garage and walk 2 blocks to a restaurant, right? So why is that? When you think about walkability, it's people. It's trying to animate spaces so they'll actually be conducive to people being there. Why is it important? Well, there are a number of reasons. One of them is global. One of them is a very broad, universal reason, which is that we've become very dependent on cars. Our culture is very reliant on cars. We live in suburbs. We have to drive very far to get from where we live to where we work to where we play. We take the kids to school. And so in a global sense, it's a good idea to promote walkability to try to make these spaces closer to each other. So we can reduce our reliance on cars, on fossil fuels. We can reduce our carbon footprint, right? We can reduce obesity. Try to encourage people basically to walk. It's a good thing. But there are specific reasons why there are areas in certain cities that we need to focus on as far as making them more walkable. And there are a couple reasons. Some may be that this city space itself is really a focus of attention. It may be a place that people associate with that city, and so it becomes its really most identifiable area. Reno has a city core, a casino core that many people associate with the city, and it's actually the least characteristic area in the city, but it really kind of occupies a big place in people's image of Reno. So it's also true for residents, that residents associate their downtown area with what speaks for them, and they feel like it represents the city to the broader public. And so if we don't have a city core that we can be proud of, that is a place where people actually want to spend time, then you're not going to have economic investment. You're not going to have people thinking positively of your space. This could also be a place that might be the landing area where most people show up when they first come to your city. We're right off the highway. The center core is the first image that a lot of people see of the city. So there's reasons that might be very important as a way to, a place to animate, to particularly make appealing for people to walk. A second reason is that these places could be located at crossroads. And so they are not important to animate just for themselves and for the kind of economic investment you want to have there, but for the fact that they are actually in pathways between other places where people want to go. And so if you don't have walkable places in the middle here at your crossroads, then you've really created an obstacle for movement. In Reno itself, we have a lot of places that I think of as being pockets of walkability that are kind of surrounding areas around this core. And we like that place and we like that place, but we don't like going through the middle, right? So we're at the university, and it's just 6 or 7 blocks south to get down to the river, to the riverfront area. But walking through a lot of that area isn't a comfortable place to be, and that's tough for students who might live in the other parts of the city. It's tough for people who are trying to have businesses in different areas and animate the center of that city and keep people kind of going through. We have shopping districts. On the other side, we have a ballpark. And in the middle, people don't really feel comfortable walking through. And this is true in other cities. You might have a hospital district and then a residential area, or a shopping district and then a big park, And so in the middle, you have these kind of impediments to places. And so we need to animate these corridors and think about how can you get people comfortable being on the streets in these areas so we can connect. We need to connect these areas. The places, the cities we like to walk in, you can walk for blocks and blocks and blocks because there's never any shortage of things to do. There's never any obstacles that would keep you moving from place to place. So when you think about trying to animate these, once you decide that walkability is a goal, that is a specific thing you want to focus on in an area, a lot of your choices actually become pretty easy because you add these questions about walkability to the other questions that you've already asked. How can we make this place look nicer? How can we make this place function better? How can we add more economic investment? And then additionally ask, how can I get more people on the streets? So they feel more comfortable all the time, no matter what time of day it is, no matter who they are, and why they're there. And one big concept to think about is variety. Variety in appearance, but also in function, and also in variety of people, of users who are going to be in this space. Traditionally, towns had a lot of variety altogether on their streets because they were smaller, because our technologies of transportation weren't that sophisticated, and people lived in closer areas. So what we now call mixed-use development is actually just trying to imitate an earlier form, which is that we had retail and commercial and offices and residences all together in these spaces. This is what new urbanism is trying to replicate right now, right, is bring these areas closer together. Reno was called the biggest little city in the world, not for its size, this is coined before 1930, but because we had such a mix of different people on the streets in a little town for its size. We had people who were coming in on the railroad, people who were coming in on the freeway, people who were coming in for divorce, we had rich people, we had cowboys, ranchers, children, people pushing, strollers along. There were so many people on the street that it seemed to be incredibly cosmopolitan and active for a town that was so small. And now, so that's a variety of appearance, but it's a variety of use, because you want to think about tourists in an urban space, in an urban setting, are interested in experiencing cities. They're experiencing and seeing authentic city life. They want to see residents. They want to know that they're part of a safe place where there's actually a lot going on. This is what we've done to our downtown now, is created a lack of variety in this downtown casino core, so it's all oriented toward tourists. And so that does something weird, when tourists take over a downtown space that's the traditional residential core, residents feel alienated from their own downtown, right? You bring tourists back, in and mix these people together, and then residents feel like they haven't given up a part that's very important of their own city, and tourists feel safe. Now, there's no variety visually here, too, you can see. So in casinos in particular, but this is true for a lot of other architecture, casinos uniquely turn inward, but this could be a mall or a convention center, or even a skyscraper, doesn't have a lot of external variety. We have a casino downtown, the Silver Legacy, that has realized they need more variety in appearance, and so they've decided that they need to replicate a city street to actually look like what a vital city street would look like. But in truth, all these storefronts are fake, and there are signs for boutiques, and there are signs for saloons, but you can't go in the door because it's just a whole block-sized casino, right? So they recognized the problem, but they didn't animate the street with their solution. Imagine if these were all turned into actual storefronts, and that each site here actually was a boutique or a store or a travel agency, and how many more people would get on that street in the course of the day. So variety is important, but not just in appearance. We had a variety, an infrastructure of buildings around in our city core that had all sorts of different uses. This is a bank building that's now part of Harrah's. It's actually the Ichiban restaurant is in there. So these spaces exist, we can see them, but trying to actually bring back the variety is important. The second thing is scale. This is the Mgm Grand that was built in 1978. It was completed in 78. And this is what really changed the scale of downtown. We had casinos since 1931 when gambling was legalized. But we didn't have the huge scale of block-sized casinos really until the 1970s. The Mgm Grand went in 1 mile east of downtown Reno because it couldn't fit in downtown Reno for the size they wanted. This place was all about scale and size. It was about having a stage that was big enough to land a jet plane on, right? And they did in part of their show. And it had its tallest tower, right, most gaming space. So when this happened, the downtown casinos really felt like they needed to compete. And so they started to knock down all of that kind of variety of storefronts and build huge block-sized casinos that then were at a scale that is not a human scale. The signs were not at street level, right? The signs are big, they're huge, they're meant to be seen from a distance. The Mgm Grand is not a place that you can walk from anywhere else, right? And that building is still there and has kind of changed ownership over the years. But you think about scale and you think about how this is not pedestrian size, and the pedestrians who walk along these areas are dwarfed, right? And this is another hostile environment for walkers because it's not intended for them. And then you think that we would have really learned something from doing this to our spaces downtown that said clearly, these spaces are about tourists, they're not about walkers, they're about drivers. But instead what we did is replicated the problem in a lot of the new development that we brought in. We built a bowling stadium that is, again, a block-size structure that oh, this is a parking garage. This is an attempt to disguise scale. This is saying I am not a big parking garage. I have actually trees. I have actually a natural environment here for walking. It's not fooling anyone, but it was noticing. This is the acknowledgement again that there was a problem with scale and that we needed to do something to change that facade. But when you're actually walking along there, you're just in between a parking garage and some trees, and it doesn't actually do anything for your walkability. In fact, it might mask criminal activity in some way because there's no other reason to be there. What we did then is we built these 3 structures. We built a national bowling stadium, we built an event center, we built a ballroom, and they're all the same problem. They're all actually these block-size areas where there aren't activities going on in and out, so you're not animating that street at all. When there's not an event going on in these spaces, these blocks are actually more dead than the casino areas because there isn't something going on if there's not a concert inside, or an event or a bowling tournament. So those spaces do not feel safe when these events aren't going on because there's nobody around there to make people feel safe. The last thing to think about is connection. We have to think about how we can actually fill in the blanks, how we can use what we have to animate these corridors and actually give them more life. And that means actually trying to fill in, actually with infill, what can we put in these areas that will appeal to more people and different times of day, right, at different times of day, because when kids are coming home from the university and going downtown, you want them to be able to intersect with people who are going out for the night, who are going to, a bar or a restaurant. You can figure out how to animate these spaces that are even, parking garages. You can deal with that scale by actually putting things on the ground floor that will keep people active and going along those corridors. You can use the infrastructure that we have. We have existing pedestrian scale infrastructure, but the businesses in them aren't really appealing to the resident population, right? They're really kind of appealing to tourists. So fill those things in and try to figure out how to animate the spaces that we see all around us. There are a lot of buildings, there's an infrastructure downtown that can be used for these purposes, that can be used for live and work and play and try to do all these things and accomplish what the processes that have led to this point have really led us away from, which is populating that street at any time. And so we need to go be aware of what opportunities exist down there. And the thing that we can do as people, you might be saying, I'm not an urban planner, I'm not an architect, I'm not a business owner, I don't want to relocate my business in this area, what can I do? And the important thing is go down and walk, find a nice day, find a friend, go down to these areas and actually walk around and see what you see. We have to make these sidewalks more conducive to walking. We can't put our poles and our utilities and trees right in the middle of a sidewalk. Even these places that might have wonderful places to go on either side are going to have an obstacle if you can't actually feel comfortable walking there. So you just have to go down. You have to try to get familiar with these areas that we can believe as a community we need to work on and animate and connect to each other. And if we create these anchors, one little space, one little bakery can make a big difference. Create an anchor that then you can look toward as you go to the next place, and you just start one piece at a time. And in that way, we all participate in this because we try to find reasons to go downtown. Take a walking tour, take a map, just walk around, try to think of reasons to go down, have a hackathon, right? Do some, take a run and just see what opportunities exist. When you hear about proposals, support them. But the important thing to do is just use really the most important tool that you have when it comes to promoting walkability, and that's your feet. Thanks.